One time he was at the store on Sundays, and typically the store is always closed on Sundays. And he was in there in the back stock room doing some work and organizing back there. Well, one of his friends walked through the front door, and he said, "Hey, Richard, I see that you brought your granddaughter with you." And Richard said, "No, I'm here by myself." And he said, "Well, that's strange because I seen a little girl that I thought was your granddaughter looking through the second floor window."
North Carolina has been inhabited for at least 10,000 years and is one of the United States' original 13 colonies. The state has seen a lot of history. Millions of people have come and gone over the years, but for some, they could never leave. These stories run the gamut because not every ghost story is a horror story. Some are fun, while others are poignant and even romantic. But don't let your guard down. The ghosts that haunt our final story are as chilling as they come. Welcome to First in Fright, where we explore eerie legends, supernatural tales, and everything that goes bump in the North Carolina night. I'm your host, Cooper Thornton. This is Episode 2, Paranormal Places. In this series, you'll be hearing from North Carolinians who have experienced paranormal activity firsthand. You'll also hear from North Carolina storytellers who are bringing some old legends to life. Our first storyteller explores some of the state's most haunted places where restless spirits still roam. Let's start at the Omni Grove Park Inn, a massive, storied resort hotel in Asheville, known for its stunning architecture and breathtaking views of the Blue Ridge Mountains. The famous hotel has hosted 10 U.S. presidents as well as the world's richest and most influential movers and shakers. But there is one person who checked in and never left.
She's called the Pink Lady, both because of her bright, flowing gown and because, well, no one's exactly sure who she was. Some think she may have been the wife or daughter of a powerful politician or industrialist. Others claim she was a beauty pageant queen. Still others, a party-crashing gold digger. All we do seem to know is that during the Roaring Twenties, the Pink Lady was attending a party at the hotel when she fell to her death. No one's ever seriously suggested anything like foul play in the Pink Lady's death. In an all-too-familiar tragedy, she was likely the victim of a few too many strong drinks and simply lost her balance. Ever since that fateful night, her spirit is said to linger in the hotel, and her presence is felt by many of those who stay in her old room. But the Pink Lady rarely strikes fear into those who encounter her. Quite the opposite. She's often described as a benevolent spirit, clad in a shimmering pink mist, who smiles at everyone who happens to see her. Two kinds of people seem to get her attention. Young, good-looking male guests who claim to wake in the middle of the night to someone flirtatiously tickling their feet and skin. And children who, given the hotel's complicated layout, frequently find themselves lost and separated from their families. Many a child, while waiting for a family member to find them, are reunited after spending time with a kind woman in a pink ball gown who comforts them until their family arrives. It is said that at the core of every ghost story, there are stories of regret. Perhaps the Pink Lady's flirtation with young men and warm-hearted affection for children is reflective of the life she never had, but always wanted. The hotel staff love and accept her, and many guests visit in hopes of encountering her. Despite her tragic end, the Pink Lady's spirit seems to have found a purpose in bringing comfort and a touch of playful whimsy to the guests of the charming Omni Grove Park Inn.
Another place with a ghostly guardian is one of the oldest institutions of higher education in the state, Chowan University, in picturesque Murfreesboro, North Carolina. Her name is the Brown Lady.
In the 1800s, Earlene Davidson came from a wealthy family and certainly didn't need a college education to get by in the world. Her family's fortune guaranteed her a life of leisure. But Elaine insisted that improving one's mind was not something that should be limited only to men. She wanted to make something of her life. Elaine was engaged to James Loreen, an up-and-coming lawyer in New York City, but she'd agreed to marry him only after she completed her education. At Chowan, the kind and vivacious Elaine was as popular as she was fashionable, known on campus for her keen mind and, perhaps most distinctive of all, her penchant for wearing elegant brown silk dresses. But just a few months into her sophomore year, Elaine fell ill with typhoid fever. It was a dreaded prognosis, striking down roughly 20% of those who contracted it. Out of an overabundance of caution, a hasty telegram was sent to James, who caught the first train he could from Manhattan to Murfreesboro to be with his fiancée. But when he arrived, James found that his beloved Elaine had died the previous night, October 31st, Halloween night. Every Halloween after Elaine's death, the sound of rustling taffeta could be heard moving through the hallways of the Columns building, and the old wooden floors creak and groan from invisible footfalls. While some claim it is Elaine looking for her lost love, most at Chowan University have a different take. Elaine so loved her studies and her school that she chose to remain there forever. Her spirit lingers, ever learning. Rather than terrifying Chowan students and staff, they've embraced Elaine's spirit, and to this day, the Brown Ladies become a beloved part of Chowan tradition. The campus magazine is named the Brown Lady, and each Halloween, female students don brown dresses and hold an academic bowl in Elaine's honor.
Chowan University isn't the only place where the dead mingle with the living. The Duke Mansion in Charlotte, a grand southern manor house surrounded by nearly 5 acres of private gardens, was once the perfect setting for a great love story, which turned into heartbreaking tragedy with a spooky twist.
In the late 1920s, the Duke Mansion was owned by architect John Avery. John was a kind, intelligent, and educated man. His house overflowed with books. His ailing wife, Anastasia, also loved literature, and for years John lifted her spirits by reading to her. However, when her health continued to deteriorate, Anastasia had to be institutionalized far from the mansion. John, understandably, grew lonely. So when he was approached by Maggie Blake, a young writer who wished to write about his historic residence, John was glad for the company. As they spent more and more time together wandering the great house, their romance blossomed. However, Maggie also realized that the principal John was far too honorable to leave his ailing wife, and she decided it would be best if they no longer spent time together. John begged Maggie to meet with him at the mansion exactly 1 year later at the stroke of midnight to see if either of their feelings may have changed. He would always come for her, he promised devotedly, dead or alive. The following year was devastating for both of them. Maggie couldn't get John out of her mind. Against her better judgment, she wrote him a slew of letters, and while he responded enthusiastically at first, the letters began to slow to a trickle, and then, one day, stopped altogether. Finally, a year had passed, and despite John's silence, Maggie decided to honor his request. She met her former lover in the library of his great house, in the middle of a dark, turbulent thunderstorm. Lightning cracked the inky night sky. But when she reached out to take John's hand, her own passed right through his. Dead or alive, the apparition said with a playful, if sorrowful wink, before fading away. Maggie later learned that John had died just a few days earlier, following complications with polio, which had afflicted him since he was a boy. He'd written her many more letters, but had grown too ill to send them. Today, the Duke Mansion is a bed and breakfast, and you can stay in one of its many beautiful rooms. But beware, some visitors report that John's spirit is still lingering.
These wistful, bittersweet tales can be misleading. Not every North Carolina haunting involves forlorn lovers and friendly ghosts. Some are victims whose lives were cut short, who beg us to see them, beg us to right the wrongs they cannot. Michael Smith understands this all too well.
My name is Michael Smith. Most people call me Smitty, and I'm the new owner of Madison Dry Goods and Dry Goods Country Store located in Madison, North Carolina, which is about 45 minutes northeast of Winston-Salem. This location has a long and a troubled history thanks to the horrific actions of one man, Charlie Lawson. Charlie Lawson was a tenant farmer. He had moved his entire family to Germington, a small town roughly half an hour southwest of Madison, because he found a piece of land where he and his family could live and grow tobacco. But on Christmas Day, 1929, Charlie murdered his wife and 6 of his 7 children, aged 17 to just 4 months. Charlie's oldest son, Arthur, was away on an errand to the general store and was the only one that was spared. Afterwards, Charlie went into the woods and he shot himself. A short time later, extended family arrived to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, and when they got to the house, they found the gruesome murder scene. They put all the family members in the living room until the hearses could come and collect the family members. It had snowed so much, the hearses could not get up the driveway, so they had to summon people from the countryside to come and help bring the bodies down the hill. And there were so many bodies, it was overwhelming, so they decided, let's take them to the next nearest town, which would be Madison. Madison Dry Goods at the time was Penn Hardware, but during that time, upstairs was a funeral service, so they brought them up the elevator that still exists and brought them to the second floor to the morgue, where the body sat for 2 days, and after they had finished doing the external autopsies, they brought them to the burial site where they still rest today. Shortly after the murders, Marion Lawson, who is Charlie Lawson's brother, decided that he would open up the cabin and the farm to tourists. He charged individuals 25 cents in order to go in to see the crime scene. You would go through the cabin where you would see the blood-stained floors. It continued to be a tourist attraction for many years. In addition to opening the cabin for tours, they sold souvenirs. The picture of the cabin, the tobacco barn, the guns. In that set of souvenir photographs was the infamous photograph of the family. Approximately 10 to 14 days before the murder occurred, Charlie took his whole family to a studio and told them that he had a Christmas surprise. And this Christmas surprise was this family photograph. He paid for everyone in his family to get new clothing, and in this photograph that's captured is the only photograph that's known of the entire family together. They're wearing the clothes that he purchased, which they would also later be buried in a few days later. That photograph still exists, and luckily I possess that. I've always been fascinated in history, and particularly local history. So when I was doing research, I came across the Lawson family murders. I learned that a place that I had visited when I was a little boy was the funeral service that had serviced the family, and that was located in Madison, North Carolina, called Madison Dry Goods. So I proceeded to go out to Madison to rekindle a relationship that I had at an early age when I attended high school in Madison. When I reached out to Richard Miller, the owner of the dry goods store, he indicated that not only was it a dry goods store and a local attraction just for that reason, but also because on the second floor he had a museum dedicated to the Lawson family murders. He knows so much history about Madison and the Lawson family murders. And so I stayed there for hours, and Richard brought me upstairs and told me that the place that I was standing was where the Lawson family bodies once laid when they were brought to the store in 1929. And I was overwhelmed by just a feeling of history and just standing in literally the spaces that I had been researching. Although the murder had happened nearly 100 years ago, Richard brought the story back to life. We started talking, and one step led to another, and he decided that, he was ready to retire. He loved my love of the Lawson family history, and so we started negotiations, and eventually I purchased the dry goods store, and I'm the owner of it today. Although the building is well over 100 years old now, we still use it as a functional store. We get visitors from all around the world that come in nearly every week, and they come in to see not only the items that we have to purchase, the clothing and the dry goods, but also for the history that we have upstairs, the Lawson Family Murder Museum. It may come as no surprise to some people that it being a former funeral home and being related to the Lawson family, that we get many reports that the dry goods building is haunted. Richard, when I went into the store for the very first time after several years, reiterated his experience that he had. For instance, one time he was at the store on Sundays, and typically the store is always closed on Sundays, and he was in there in the back stock room doing some work and organizing back there. Well, one of his friends walked through the front door, and he said, "Hey, Richard, I see that you brought your granddaughter with you." And Richard said, "No, I'm here by myself." And he said, "Well, that's strange, because I seen a little girl that I thought was your granddaughter looking through the second floor window." The gentleman had seen a little girl approximately 6 to 8 years old wearing a white dress, and he had just assumed that it was Richard's granddaughter. Anybody who's ever seen anything at Madison Dry Goods has always seen something on the second floor, and has always typically seen a little girl in a white dress. Some people suspect that this little girl is one of the Lawson family members. It's a period outfit that would have been worn during the 1920s, and even has a short haircut like one of the little girls does in the original Lawson family picture. I've always been fascinated by ghost stories, but, even I was skeptical. When I bought the store, I kind of thought that it was just a bunch of people who maybe wanted to believe something that wasn't necessarily true. So I wasn't afraid to, work at the store late at night by myself. One night I was upstairs. I had just purchased the store, and I heard what was apparently footsteps on the third floor walking above me. I know from going through the building that on that side of the building, no one could walk in that area. You'd have to be bent down or slouched to be able to walk. I kind of listened, and you could hear thump, thump, thump. The sound that I heard came from the Lawson Museum walking out towards the open area where there's antiques for sale. I kind of followed the sound that I heard, and as I stood there, I continued to hear footsteps coming down the stairs from the second floor to the first floor. And it frightened me so bad, because I knew that there was no one else in the building but me, and that no one could walk up there if they were human. I was so afraid that I actually called my mom, and people laugh at this and make fun of me for it, but I called her and I said, "Mom, I need you to talk to me because I'm hearing noises." And she's like, "Well, I didn't know why you wanted to buy a supposedly haunted place anyway." But shortly after that, we started building walls for where we would put antique booths up on the second floor. And as my friend and I were trying to debate where we were going to put this very large bookshelf that weighed a ton, my friend said, "Well, why don't we just put it in the old funeral parlor?" And as soon as he said that, we heard these two loud knocks come from that room. Me, again, trying to make logic of it, decided, well, maybe somebody's downstairs knocking at the front door. I walked downstairs, There's no one on the street. There's no cars passing by. There's nothing. And so I walked upstairs, and the guy that was helping me was frightened because I had left him up there with, who knows what. I checked to see if there was anyone in the old funeral parlor. There was no one in there, which further led to, us being frightened and saying, well, maybe we need to get out of here until the daylight comes. That's not the only experiences that I've had. Around Halloween time, and to kind of play a joke or to make it a little bit mysterious, I decided that I would take a doll that one of our vendors had that was upstairs for sale and put it in one of the windows that a lot of people had said that they had seen the little girl's face peering through. The doll wouldn't stay up on the windowsill, and in that room we have a furnace that has some wooden logs. So I took one of those wooden logs and kind of pushed it up behind the doll in the window so the doll couldn't fall out of the window. And I was the last one out of the store. We have an alarm system. I set the alarm. I'm the only one that has that alarm code. And the very next morning, I'm pulling up to the dry goods store, and I look up into that window, and the doll's not there. So I went upstairs, and the log is still up in the windowsill, but the doll is on the ground on its back. And I said, well, that's odd, because I'd put the log there to make sure that it didn't just fall. So I put it back in the window, put that log, I shoved it as hard as I could to pin the legs of the doll, up under the log against the window. And I didn't think really much of it. Later that night, when I was leaving the building, I looked up in the window and the doll's there. So I said, okay, well, maybe it just was, a coincidence. And as I approached the building the next morning, the doll was, again, not in the windowsill. And as I went into that room upstairs, the doll again was laying on its back, basically was peering at me as I came in the door with the log still in the windowsill. So it could be that this little girl that's stuck at the store, said to be around 7, 8 years old, is enjoying these toys that we're leaving out for her to play with. Shortly after I purchased the store, I had a customer come down, and she said, my necklace that I've been wearing all day just fell off my neck. She said it happened upstairs, leading out into the big open area where we have antiques for sale now. A week later, almost to the day, I had a young man come down the stairs, and he said, the cross just fell off of my necklace. Well, sir, where did that happen? In the hallway, just crossing into the big open area where you sell antiques. And I was so astonished. We've had customers who have come down literally with goosebumps on their arm that have said that they walked into a cold spot. If you've ever been in the store during the summertime, you will quickly realize on the second floor there's not central heating and air. So for someone to hit a cold spot on the second floor, that's very unusual. We've had people who had sat on the bench upstairs on the second floor, and they'll close their eyes and they swear that someone touches their hand or their leg. We've had people hear voices, and it all seems to be centered in the Lawson Family Murder Museum. Most people wonder how I can own a store that's haunted or how I stay there late at night, and sometimes I question myself when I'm there by myself, especially during the winter months when it gets dark a little bit sooner. If you were upstairs and you saw me cutting all the lights off late at night, you'll probably see me running down the stairs about half the time because I'll hear a noise or I'll get frightened by something that I might see out of the corner of my eye. But I think that we try to pay respect to the victims and the tragedy. This is a way that, although tragic and just horrible in every sense, that we can discuss what happened in the most respectful way possible and kind of pay tribute to them so that way they live on. The museum is free. We don't get any money out of the museum. I wanted to make it very clear that, this is not a museum that we're here to make profit on. I even went to the gravesite. I paid respects there. I brought flowers. I think the epitaph on the Lawson's grave says it best. Not now, but in the coming years, we'll be in a better land. We'll read the meaning of our tears, and sometime we'll understand.
And that brings us to the end of today's journey, where we've uncovered the truth behind the ghosts at some of North Carolina's most haunted places, yearning to be remembered and understood. In our next episode, we'll explore more of the Tar Heel State's unsettling sightings. Creatures everyone assumes are mythological, but just may be as real as you or me.
All of a sudden, I hear a noise behind me, and I turn around, and sitting on top of this rock face is this creature, looking at me with its blue eyes and its tongue out, with its body curled in on itself, perched on the rock like it's ready to jump.
To learn more about the paranormal places and scary stories of North Carolina, visit ncfirstinfright.com. Discover trails and destinations that will haunt you in the best way, and share your own NC scare by tagging hashtag #NCFirstInFright. First in Fright is a production of Visit North Carolina, Luke Wire, and AYR Media. Hosted by me, Cooper Thornton. Executive producers Katie Bailey and Dana Grimstead for Visit North Carolina. Executive producers Nancy Landisberg, Michael Ashley, and Ryan Coleman for Luke Wire. Executive producer Eliza Rosen for AYR Media. Produced and written by Brandon Phibbs. Edited and mixed by Cameron Taggy. Casting producer Danielle Hillenbrand. AYR Media Coordinator Andy Levine. Voices by North Carolina storyteller Catherine Dean. Special thanks to Michael Smitty Smith for sharing his story.